fasting is a strategy for helping prevent cancer?
It's a natural strategy. There's nothing artificial about it. It's been used for thousands of years, and it's totally free and totally accessible to anybody in the world. If you're getting rid of old stuff and putting in new stuff, that's a process of rejuvenation. Your cells are either trying to grow or they go into this sort of maintenance repair mode, therefore reducing risk of cancer.
You know, one of the things, and I really, really love that book, is that you say that fasting could be is a strategy for helping kind of like prevent cancer. Is that like, so before you tell me that though, I wanted to know if there's before I ask you about that. So is there what are the other health benefits from doing the fasting or from eating less or from, time, kind of like eating the intermittent fasting way or the fasting or just eating less time? What are the other health benefits? Is it longevity, of course?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a lot. One, of course, is its use in terms of losing weight.
Right.
Second is, in terms of treatment of type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, if you simply don't eat, your body will use up some of that sugar that's in your blood, and therefore your blood sugar goes down. Right. So that's obviously very useful, and it's a natural strategy. There's nothing artificial about it. It's been used for thousands of years, and it's totally free and totally accessible to anybody in the world, even if you have no money, right? And that's great. The other thing, of course, increased energy, right? Your body is actually, as long as you have sufficient fat storage, your body is going to use it and therefore increase the energy, because that's what happens in your body naturally when you don't eat, is that you're increasing your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. So you're getting increased energy. You're getting increased levels of concentration. So when people don't eat, it's the same thing. You're actually pumping up the energy in your system. We can measure people's memory, people's focus, people's concentration. It's actually better than when you're eating, which everybody knows, of course. Like if you eat a big Thanksgiving meal, you're not really sharp afterwards. You just want to sit down and relax and watch some TV, because all the food needs to be digested and stuff. If you don't eat, that's that hungry wolf, right? You're sharp, you're right on it. So, that's a huge benefit for people who sort of make their living. And this is one of the reasons why in Silicon Valley, it's sort of fasting took off, because these sort of geniuses were like competing with each other at Google to make a lot of money. So it's like, hey, any edge they wanted, they wanted that edge, not physically, but mentally. So an interesting story in one of these books, Unbroken by Lauren Hillenbrand, which is a biography of this World War II prisoner of war, American prisoner of war in Japan. He was literally starving. They had nothing to eat. And he would observe these other prisoners doing these incredible mental feats. One guy read a book entirely from memory, another learned Norwegian in a week. And he's going, yeah, that's just the astonishing mental clarity of starvation. And he's just sort of blasé about it. It's like, yeah, people do amazing things when they're starving. I'm like, wow, how come nobody ever talked about that?
I know, I never heard that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's because the fasted state has sort of gone away. But you have those, the mental clarity, that the longevity, which you see with calorie restriction. You'd have this thing called autophagy, which is very sort of, people are very interested in, because it's this state where you're sort of, it's a state of rejuvenation, basically. So it was the 2016 Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to one of the researchers in it. And essentially, it's a time during fasting where your body is breaking down certain proteins. And everybody says, wow, that's really bad. Turns out it's really good, because when you break down those proteins, your body breaks down the stuff that is old, and then your growth hormone goes up. So when you eat again, you're going to rebuild it. So if you're getting rid of old stuff and putting in new stuff, that's a process of rejuvenation. And, that's potentially one of the big benefits. People also talk about things like Alzheimer's disease, for example. Potentially there's a role in that. Potentially there's a role in cancer prevention.
How is that? Because you're not letting the cells...
That's very theoretical. But one of the things that is clear is that your body, when it fasts, your body sort of has this balance between growth and sort of longevity. So when you want to grow, that's, building things, everybody thinks that's good. But the problem is that that's usually at the expense of longevity. So your cells are either trying to grow or they go into this sort of maintenance repair mode. As you get older, it's more important to get into this sort of maintenance repair mode, and you get that by doing the fasting. So therefore, when you're shutting down the growth signals, so remember that insulin and all of the, if you eat protein, you activate mTOR, and these are all nutrient sensors.
Mm-hmm.
So your body senses the nutrition. When it senses nutrition, it increases growth signaling. So you're telling your body, grow, grow, grow. Well, if you're telling your body, grow, 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 that's generally not good for cancer. When you don't eat, when you fast, you're actually telling your body, don't grow,
Mm-hmm.
which is good when you're an adult, not so good when you're a kid, but when you're an adult,
Right.
it's good. So therefore, you're reducing your growth signaling and therefore reducing risk of cancer. So obesity, for example, is a huge risk factor for many types of cancer, for example. And cancer is hugely complicated because that's not the only thing that's happening. There's lots of other issues like smoking and alcohol and cirrhosis. There's a lot of issues with cancer, but one of the things that might be very important is sort of the effect of obesity, the effect of type 2 diabetes, and that's where fasting, by preventing the weight gain, is going to lower your risk of those obesity-associated cancers, of which include breast cancer and colorectal cancer, sort of the two of the big ones.
But what part of that is genetics in terms of cancer? Like, are you genetically prone to cancer? They say, with the breast cancer.
Yeah, certainly. Cancer is certainly multifocal. So it's not just about nutrition and obesity and so on, because you saw cancer, a long time ago. But you increase your risk of cancer. So, for example, if you look at Japanese breast cancer rates, for example, versus American, it's like 3 times higher in North America compared to Japan. So not all of the risk of cancer is related to nutrition and obesity, but you can sort of tilt your odds. Genetics plays a big role, but if you look at overall cancer, it's about 25% of risk. So 75% of the risk of cancer is still other things. The two biggest ones, number one is tobacco smoking. At about 30% of the risk of cancer is related to smoking. So that's obviously important. Everybody agrees on that. The second most important thing, very close behind it, is diet, and that's at about 30%. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing because it's a huge part of cancer causation that we don't often talk about. We talk about things like carcinogens and other things which are like 2 to 5% of cancer risk.
So even if you're genetically predisposed for it, you can modify the chances by your lifestyle, by what you eat. So I guess for that purpose, like you're saying, the fasting could be a good tool to use for that, more or less.
It's a tool. Yeah, exactly. It's a tool within that sort of lifestyle piece. So if you look at and there are other causes of cancer, like viruses, for example. Certain viruses cause cancer, like human papillomavirus causes cervical cancer. So no amount of nutrition or weight loss is going to affect that, because that's has nothing to do with it, right? But some of the they used to be called lifestyle associated cancers, and you'd look and people used to go up to Northern Ontario actually to study the Inuit because they said these people just don't get any cancer. Then of course they started eating a lot of sugar and flour, and then they got all the same cancers that we got. But in the 1920s, people would send expeditions. Queen's University used to send an expedition to the north to see why these people were sort of protected against cancer. Turns out they weren't at all. It was that their lifestyle was so anti-cancer that they just never got it, other than those viral cancers.
So like sugar though, because I guess doesn't sugar doesn't sugar for your cells, or doesn't it kind of feed on something in your body that makes things kind of go awry? Is that possible? Or
Yeah,
is it
cancer sort of loves sugar, and glucose. Carbohydrates are types of sugar, of course.
right, right,
They feed on them almost exclusively, so therefore it is a little bit easier. Like it's not the whole story, but clearly plays a role, likely related to obesity and type 2 diabetes as well. It's all in that sort of mix of metabolic diseases. And that's why it's so important, because that's the one thing that we can control. We can't control our genetics, but we can control the foods that we eat and how often we eat them. So if you're sort of increasing your fasting period and stuff, you're going to allow your body to use some of it and therefore turn down the growth signaling,
right?
right? You're telling your whole body basically to not grow as quickly. And that translates to slower growth in cancer as well.
Are there any other strategies that you want to talk about that for us to kind of to help prevent cancer, besides, of course, what we just talked about, like the potential of fasting or food you
I
use?
mean, again, cancer is a huge topic, and there's many different types of cancer. But in terms of
And you
cancer, the
talk about the
important
cancer
thing,
paradigm.
yeah, it's trying to transition us, because we came again through the sort of, 90s and 2000s. We sort of looked at cancer as a purely genetic disease, because genetics was as a field was just expanding at such an incredible rate. We could map genes and map whole the whole human all the DNA in the human body, sort of thing, right? That was in 2000 the big Human Genome Project. But so we sort of started to look at cancer as this purely genetic thing, but it turns out it wasn't. Most of it is still environmental, and it's not just about nutrition, but it's really about chronic damage, chronic inflammation, which can come from multiple sources, one of which is like tobacco smoke, for example. So chemicals, tobacco smoke. So it's really about not just your diet, but also your environment. Trying to make sure that you're not getting any sources of chronic inflammation, chronic damage, and that can include doing things like exercise, which is a great way to sort of lower your stress levels and so on. So all of those things combined can be very important. But yeah, it's part of it. The one part that's sort of most within our control is, other than smoking, the diet.
But can you stress your body too much from exercise if you overdo it? Because
For sure.
And then
Sure.
can that cause your like your immune system to be I guess not just kind of weaker? Does that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, although most people never get to that state, but yes, you can. I mean, just remember that everything is a stress on the body. Stress on the body is good, because your body then responds to it by getting stronger. If you overdo that stress, that's when you get into real trouble. So even fasting is a stress on the body, absolutely. If you do too much, yes, you're going to do damage. You need to have proper nutrition. So everything there is sort of a balance. But yeah, nutrition is sort of one of the big fields that is left. And it turns out it's mostly related through obesity. So there's no one specific diet that has been shown to be sort of the cancer preventing. Some people say, well, if you just eat vegetarian, you're going to be protected, but not necessarily. I mean, it's much more complicated than that.
Explain what metformin is for people who don't know what metformin is.
It's a diabetes drug.
Right. A lot of people take it for longevity and anti-aging.
So that's not, in my view, wise.
Why?
Why?
Explain.
Because it actually inhibits mitochondrial function. It literally you said that your understanding, okay, as a fitness person, is that NR and NAD is good for mitochondria.
Right.
So I could show you data that metformin depresses mitochondrial function. How do you feel about it now?
Okay, well, no, this is why I wanted to have you on so badly, because there's such conflict. Like, one person says one thing, and I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
I had David St. Clair on a while ago, and he was talking all about NAD as being, a longevity drug. He takes it every day. Also metformin we talked about as well. And, people build their platform and business around using words like anti-aging or longevity because I think it's easy and palatable for people to understand.
Yep.
But you're like the antithesis. You're like a scientist, unless you have clear, exact. I mean, I guess that's how
I don't want to hype, right?
You're about zero hype.
I mean, the thing is that I actually think that hype hurts, and the metformin and rapamycin thing, may be a great example of that, right? So you're taking drugs that are indicated for people that have conditions, right?
Right.
So metformin is used as a diabetes drug. It helps people that have diabetes control their blood glucose. Okay,
their blood levels.
That's important, right? And rapamycin was developed as an immune modulator that will allow people to do that avoid graft versus host and other things. I really don't want to take something that is going to depress my immune system, right? Then some of the the rapamycin fans come out and say, well, it's immune modulating, it's upregulating this and then it's downregulating that. To me, it's not, it's something that's sure it's being tested in dogs. There's a lot of data on mice, but I don't think that, I think it's easily demonstrable that prescription drug use is associated with shorter lifespans. It's easily demonstrable that for thousands of years, the claims that people have made about fountains of youth and anti-aging have been wrong and not evidence-based. So I'm generally, my starting position is going to be, I'm going to take the other side of that bet.
Okay, well, so good. So I'm going to go through a few of them. So you said already, metformin, because people, I think it's more of like a biohack, right? People are using it more for they think if they're regulating their blood sugar, that will help them with longevity. How? Then why are they taking, what is the other side's,
some of those people are also keto and
exactly,
and
usually they are, or they're intermittent fasting. Do you like intermittent fasting?
Well, it's extremely powerful in mice, but of course, a mouse has a much more rapid metabolism, and hour per hour comparisons of fast are much more severe in a mouse than they are in a human. That's right? And so, some of that stuff doesn't actually translate. So, for example, Ethan Weiss, who's a very accomplished cardiology professor at UCSF, actually practiced intermittent fasting for 7 years. Okay, he believed in intermittent fasting. He set up a very wise, well-controlled clinical trial of intermittent fasting versus non-intermittent fasting, and basically could not demonstrate a benefit. And so I think that the intermittent fasting idea is, sciencey, and I think that it's very evidence-based in mice. The idea that, and personally, for sure, overeating is bad and is associated with obesity and type 2 diabetes and, orthopedic problems, sleep apnea, you name it, right?
Right.
And a lot of bad outcomes and a lot of shorter, health spans, lifespans. But that doesn't mean that, fasting is necessarily going to be a lifespan extending thing. For me, I think that I'm a breakfast person. Okay, so I get up, I have black coffee, I have breakfast, and then I can work, I can exercise, I can function fine. I don't eat too late at night. I think it is important to have, the hunger cycle in there, but absolutely, am I on the clock about feeding, fasting? No, that's not a practice of mine.
But how about that's why I like love having you on. It's like you're the opposite of what so many scientists, doctors have said on the show. What about autophagy? Autophagy.
Okay, so autophagy, fascinating molecular mechanism, right? So the idea in autophagy is that there are cells that have too much stuff and some damaged proteins and stuff like that. And so with some, sort of nutritional deprivation, they turn over some of their molecules and then they kind of get refreshed and stuff like that. Absolutely. We know that that's a mechanism in the lab. When people say, oh yeah, I'm fasting and my levels of this and that are such and such, and so I'm kicking up my autophagy, I think it's kind of babble. There's no measurement of their autophagy. And strangely enough, some of the same people that take, rapamycin, right, are also taking like leucine and leucine related amino acids whose biochemical effect is to stimulate the TOR pathway.
Right.
In order to make more muscle.
Yeah, make more,
right?
Yeah,
and they're literally taking leucine, which is going to stimulate TOR, and then they're taking rapamycin, which is going to inhibit TOR. It's sort of like too many drugs, too many supplements, and it makes no sense.
It's like basically doing too many different diets at the same time. It's all basically counteracting each other.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
That's basically it. Okay, so then how about metformin we got. Resveratrol.
Resveratrol.
Yeah.
So resveratrol is a perfectly nice antioxidant, right? It's found in grapes, right? It's also found in peanuts. And, it has a lot of, proteins in human cells that it, associates with. There's a lot of proposed mechanisms for beneficial effects of it. There's a lot of things that it does in cell culture. There's a few things it does in mice. I'm pretty doubtful of anything demonstrated that it does in people. One of the proposed mechanisms of resveratrol is that it binds to a human protein called SIRT1. It doesn't. And then
it doesn't?
No.
So where did this all come from? Because do you remember that was like the biggest craze, the biggest fad. Things always cycle, right? Like now,
it came from a series of, peer-reviewed studies whose conclusions are not reproducible, right? So initially it was found in supposedly a yeast assay in which it made yeast to live longer. Right.
Right.
So, and I've used that assay before, and that assay depends upon a yeast gene called SIR2, and SIR2 is a perfectly nice yeast gene. The problem is that, that increasing the lifespan of a yeast is not the same as increasing the lifespan of a worm, fly, or mouse or human. And all of the subsequent stuff that was said about the SIR2 related genes in worms turned out not to be true, in flies turned out not to be true. It couldn't be demonstrated in mice. Resveratrol was said to bind to the yeast SIR2 protein and then to the human SIRT1 protein. It doesn't do those things. Now there's a paper a few years ago that said, oh, here's the way it really does bind to human SIRT1. But if you look at the structure and how it supposedly binds to SIRT1, if that's true, then it couldn't have been discovered the way it was discovered by binding to yeast SIR2 because they don't have the same amino acid sequences like the protein structure. So the whole thing is a mess. It's a mess. And the people that were convinced to take resveratrol were really sold a bill of goods, and anybody that is still defending it is not being evidence-based.
Wow, that is unbelievable, because that was like the big thing that everyone
Sure,
was
of course.
told
Yeah.
to take.
Yeah.
So basically, all these are just more just like myths. You know, metformin was Veritol.
Well, no. You know, metformin's a medicine.
It's a no, but I'm saying for the uses of longevity. For the
That's
uses,
not a myth. That's
also
a
weight
hypothesis.
loss. Also weight loss. People would take it because they thought it would, as your blood sugar is becoming more balanced, you obviously maybe lose more weight.
Well,
because you're not having those spikes of cortisol. You know,
no.
insulin.
So while the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis has also been pretty much debunked. And, you know, so it turns out, so Kevin Hall, a tremendous researcher at NIH, has very carefully compared isocaloric diets, total number of calories, that are low fat versus high fat, essentially. And, you know, according to the carbohydrate insulin model, carbohydrate insulin hypothesis, those diets should not behave the same way, because according to the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis, it's all about carbs driving your insulin to sequester, you know, fat in the adipose, blah, 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 and you'll never lose weight with a high percent carb diet. That's just not true. There's thousands of years of history in the Far East in which people had a high percent rice, high percent carbohydrate in their diet, high glycemic index food, right?
Yeah, yep.
And they were not overweight and they were not obese. And the obesity epidemic in the Far East is total calorie driven. And in fact, it's an increase in the amount of fat that is in the Asian diet, is more animal products, more meat, more animal fat. It's accompanied by a lower percent carbohydrate. Kevin Hall's study, where you look at you know, diets that have very different compositions, it kind of comes down to calories in, calories out. Basically, if you're in an energy deficit, right, meaning you're expending more energies than you're putting into your body, then you're going to lose weight, right? So it's about sustainability. It's about, if you're going to do a lifestyle intervention that is going to, you know, result in weight loss, it's got to be something you can live with.
Yeah.
So if that turns out to be high fat, if that turns out to be keto, and it's a sustainable thing for somebody,
consistency,
then basically, and they are losing weight. They're losing weight because they're in a calorie deficit and because they can sustain their diet. That doesn't invalidate anybody else's experience that is on a low fat diet that can also lose weight.
Right.
The key is, can they sustain that? You know, how many cheat days do they have?
Yeah,
or whatever.
absolutely. Because when you said the whole thing, because that's like a bad word, right? Like, it's, people get very, very mad if you say calories in versus calories out. They think that's too simplistic, right? So if I was just going to eat M&Ms and chocolate bars, but keep it at like my calorie count,
there's actually data showing that there's a person that ate nothing but baked potatoes for a month or something like that. I can't cite the study, but potato actually has a pretty high satiety.
It does. It also has a resistant starch in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, but it is a pretty high glycemic index food. And
but no fat.
It has no fat.
Yeah.
Right. So it's essentially almost an all carb diet.
It's full carb.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know, if that's, for me, would not be very pleasant.
I like baked potatoes.
I would like to actually put some, you know, onion
sour cream and onion.
Well, I do olive oil because I'm lactose intolerant. So,
okay.
But you know, all the good stuff that you can put on it, it makes it much more enjoyable, right? But so calories in, calories out is not a mechanism. Calories in and out is a basically physical constraint on the way the body works.
Right. But there's a big thing about people are all like, what calories you're putting in, your body reacts different, body composition, all the other things that happen if you have.
So a lot of that stuff is not evidence-based, and it's really not evidence-based.
It's like it basically is anecdotal, as you
well,
put
everybody wants to weight their own anecdotes,
right?
So people that swear by keto
It's because
are the
it worked
people
for
that
them.
can sustain that diet. People that swear by low fat are the people that can sustain that diet. And now, basically, I think that 2021 in terms of weight management is going to go down as the year in which, semaglutide at 2.4 milligram per week was
Say that
approved.
again?
So semaglutide. So there's something called, there's a bunch of different names. Incretins is one name. And the other thing, they're called GLP-1 analogs or GLP-1 receptor agonists, GLP-1RA. Okay. You can Google that.
Everyone should have their Google open when they listen to this podcast, or have like a thesaurus.
So I think there might be a trade name, and I don't have anything to do with the company.
Okay.
But I think the trade name is maybe Wegovy, but like scientists call it semaglutide.
Okay.
And it's related to something called GLP-1. Okay. GLP-1 actually helps your body make more insulin. Okay. So the idea that something that helps your body make more insulin could help you lose weight is already a head scratcher for somebody that thinks that insulin is the enemy.
Yes.
Okay. Insulin helps drive body into your adipose and your skeletal muscle. Insulin and all the other hormones, they're all functioning in physiology as something that are your friend until we have a problem, and then things can get messed up.
So, by the way, remember when I said to you, let's keep it very layman's terms for these people, please, and for me, those people being me.
So the bottom line
What's
is
the 2021?
Semaglutide. Basically, the way it works is by allowing people to follow through on their intentions to eat less.
Okay.
Basically, it acts in the brain at the satiety center. So it acts in a bunch of different places. But
I'm a big believer in that.
But basically it gets people to feel full, right? To the point that you want it. It's amazing actually what the side effect is, right?
What is it?
So the side effect is it can make people feel nauseous. Well, that feeling that you feel like late in Thanksgiving dinner, when like someone brings out of the kitchen the third pie, like the pecan or whatever, but you already had the apple and the pumpkin,
absolutely.
Right? And you would have loved that pecan like 2 pies ago, but there's a point where it's like, no, right?
Yes.
So it turns out that people don't have, the problem with overweight and obesity. It's not a failure of willpower. It's actually the brain gets programmed to defend a level of fat. And basically, this new class of drugs, and I know this is a lifestyle thing where you're not pushing drugs, and I'm not really pushing anything, but they allow people to feel the satiety as their body gets full. And so it's actually amazing, and I think that
I heard is that the needle?
It's like a once a week injection. There's going to be an oral version of it.
Okay, first of all, and of course I've got no dog in the game for this. I heard about that. Does that actually work though?
It really works. Like 15% weight loss in 6 or 12 months, and what compared to the same guidelines. So they'll randomize people. And they say, try to eat less, move more, right? Which we know sort of doesn't generally work, right? Mm-hmm. But enrollment in a trial gives you some responders, okay?
Yeah.
You get some people that will lose weight on the placebo, right? You see, it's called a waterfall plot. You see a few people that will gain weight. There's a lot of people in the middle that had no effect because it was on placebo. And then you see some responders, and those are the people that are like really coachable or whatever, and they didn't get any semaglutide, and yet they lost some weight over this trial, right?
Right.
Then you compare that group.
Yep.
So remember, I cautioned you against anecdotal data because your friends are not the same as everybody, right?
Right, exactly.
So then you enrolled people that had the same, only they had an intention for weight loss, they're overweight, right? And then you see the whole curve shifted where there's much greater weight loss, much greater compliance, basically. There's no magic. They all had different, whatever they eat in all of their different homes, in their hundreds of different homes. but the people that were losing weight basically were able to sustain an energy deficit, and so they lost weight.
So let's talk about intermittent fasting and keto, because like you, I get asked that question all the time. And your outlook on that is that like it's just one thing you can be doing, right? Yeah. Do you do it?
Intermittent fasting works for me, but when I say that statement, it's not because it's magic. It's because I pretty much go to bed at 11 p.m. every night. I'm up at 5. I start work at 6. I work 12 hours. I have 3 kids, I have a life. So it's a very easy structure for me to fit in 2 meals and a snack between like 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. And then in the morning, I'm training clients straight from 6 a.m. to 11. So I don't have time for breakfast anyways. So I'll have a coffee in the morning and I'll start my day. So for me, it works, but on the weekends, I don't do it. I have breakfast with my kids. My wife makes something, we'll do whatever. So I kind of do intermittent fasting 5 days on, 2 days off on the weekends, but because that works within my time schedule. 2 or 3 or 4 years ago when I was working here, or I was a consultant and I was in grad school, I would have much different meal times, but I was counting my macros, counting my calories. So that's what matters. Are you burning more calories than you're taking in if you want to lose weight? Or are you taking in more calories if you want to gain weight? And then are those calories good ones from protein for muscle, good carbs, good fats, things like that. So I try and educate my clients or people in the book about where's your food coming from? What do the numbers mean? And then what way do you want to play with the numbers? If you want to fast, cool. If you want to do keto, I'm a little strict on that. I'm not a big proponent of keto, but we'll get into that. But
well, tell me why.
So aside from inconclusive data in terms of really there's no studies show that it's better than any other diet if you're in a calorie deficit. Most people aren't going to do it right. They're like, cool, I can just eat a lot of fat and protein, so they're not going to worry about where it's coming from. I have 2 clients who have had kidney stones from it before training with me from doing keto.
Wow.
Because it ups your uric acid and creatinine, and it's stressful on your kidney.
Yeah.
Are there ways to do it right? Yes. But most people won't put in the time and effort. They're not going to get blood tests every 3 months to see their levels. They're not going to pee on the stick to see. Most people actually aren't even in ketosis. They just have a low carb diet and they're not low enough. So it's actually very hard to do a keto diet right. Yeah. And if you're not doing it right, in my opinion, you're hangry, you're not getting results, and you're risking your health without doing it right. If you're doing it right, I'll do it for 6 to 8 weeks at a time with clients if they have like a photo shoot or a movie or a wedding. Like it's a tool for me, but it's not a lifestyle unless you have maybe cancer or diabetes or some condition. It's not a way to look good.
I also think, like you said, you have to be so precise with some of these diets. And unless you have that precision, it doesn't even you don't even get the benefits. So what happens is I think a lot of times, from my experience with people, that they try to do keto or they're doing keto, but really what they're doing is like the Atkins diet, which is like a very high fat, high protein diet with low carbs, and they're not in ketosis at all. Because how many people are going to take the stick and do all that stuff?
It's tough.
It is tough. And the reality is it's not, unless you do something properly a lot of times, why put that extra effort and stress in something? What I mean is, why get stressed out about something like that when there's other ways to get to that finish line that are easier for you and your lifestyle?
And people don't even know what keto is in terms of how it works. And what it is most of your brain, it runs on glucose, runs on sugar, which comes from carbohydrates. But if you're not eating carbohydrates, our bodies are smart. They're like, hey, we have to live. So it starts this process, ketogenesis. It turns ketones and body fat and fat that you consume, dietary fat, into sugar through ketosis, through these ketones, and then puts that sugar back through your bloodstream, back through your brain, so you can be a functioning human. But it will only do that if there are no carbs in your system. So like you said, if you're on a low carb diet, if you're eating 40 or 50 carbs a day, which you can get just through fruits and veggies, it doesn't matter if you're not eating pasta or grains or this, you're not in ketosis. So you're actually not eating the body fat. Your brain and body aren't converting to using fat for energy. So you're just in this limbo place where you're not even having the benefits of eating that fat, but you have brain fog and you're tired. So it's just, can it work? Yeah, but I've seen most people who do it fail on it, or it's worked short term and then they transition back. So that's kind of how I use it.
Right, short, because it's not you're saying it's not really a lifestyle.
Yeah,
it's
I know people who do it 2 or 3 years. I'm like, whoa.
See, that's something like, I mean, at least I think, like you were saying, that like with intermittent fasting, it could work if your lifestyle works for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, there's also different windows. So you're doing, what's your window then? If you go to bed
I
at
do
11?
16-8.
16,
So
okay.
16 fasted, 8-hour window I eat.
Okay, that's not that awful,
No,
right?
No, some people do 18-6. I've seen 20 and 4. I don't know how I could ever do that.
The 20 and 4, there's a whole different diet.
Yeah.
I think what's the name of that diet? There's a name of it.
I don't know. There's big proponents of mono meals, which is just like one huge meal. And then there's the anabolic diet. There's the thing. There's so many different. I don't know what the 24 is called.
We had Gabby Reese on recently, and she was telling us about a friend of hers who does this 20-hour thing. It's like, I mean, and even I think even her Laird, who's like is like a machine. I don't even think he would do that diet. You know what I mean? It's hard to do that.
I don't know the discipline it would take.
What's the name of it though? I'm kind of like
I don't know. It's kind of bugging me too. I know it's got something, but I couldn't tell you.
I can tell you the best time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask your boss for a raise, run a mile, like you name it, it's in there.
Based on the chronotype.
Based on your chronotype.
Okay, so let's do bear, right? Because most people you said fall into the bear category.
Yeah, 55%.
55%. So then for a bear, when's the best time to have sex? When's the best time to have a cheeseburger? Go ahead, do it.
So bears are the easiest one because they're the largest group. So there's very little variation in them because the world was built on a bear's schedule. So if you go back in caveman times, we had hunters and they woke up in the morning and guess what? They were our lions. We had our villagers who would maintain the village. They were our bears. We had our sentries, our security force would stay up late and guard them and they were our wolves. So this is something that isn't new. Adding the insomnia part is new. Let's talk about sex for a second because it's the first question that everybody always asks.
Oh, really? I'm not unique in that way?
Well, maybe you're just curious in that way. So here's where it gets interesting. If you look at somebody's hormone profile to have sex, you need 5 hormones to be elevated. You need estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol, and adrenaline all to be high, and you need melatonin to be low. Okay? If you look at the survey data, 73% of people have sex between 10:30 and 11:30 at night. What do you think their hormone profile looks like?
All the things you just said?
The opposite.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because their melatonin is high.
Oh, the melatonin. Yeah, right. Oh, right.
And all of those other hormones are low.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Okay.
So number 1 is your hormone profile is not ready to have sex between 10:30 and 11:30 at night. That's number 1. Number 2, look at men. What do most men wake up with? An erection.
Yes.
Right?
If that's
not Mother Nature, if that's not Mother Nature telling you when you're supposed to use that thing, I don't know what is.
So in the morning, basically.
So morning time makes a lot more sense to have sex from a libido standpoint, from an arousal standpoint, from a performance standpoint. Like if you just look at it from a biomechanics standpoint, you're gonna perform better having sex in the morning than you do at night.
How about a girl though?
Same thing. It's actually better for women in the morning than it is for men because there's some data to now show that after a woman has an orgasm, she has energy. Whereas a lot of men, after they have an orgasm, become tired.
Right, and they fall asleep.
Right.
Right.
So the other question people always ask me is why do men always fall asleep after sex? Nobody knows the real answer, but my guess is that one of the hormones that's produced is oxytocin, which is the love hormone, right? I would bet you that if you mix testosterone with oxytocin, it causes a sedative effect, but if you mix it with estrogen, it causes an alerting effect. That would be my guess. And that's part of the reason why women get so active and are ready after sex to go do something, whereas men are exhausted and fall asleep.
And the opposite, yeah.
Right. And so again, another good reason to have sex in the morning is number 1, it's a great way to start your day. But number 2, for guys, especially guys who are more on the anxious side, it'll absolutely kind of zen them out and allow them to kind of get a peacefulness as they start their day.
Wow. Okay. How about having a cheeseburger or give me the other ones?
So when we look at eating, the timing of your eating turns out to be incredibly important. Great study looking at rodents. And what they did was there were 3 groups of identical rodents. So these are genetically modified animals that are identical. One group had access to food 24 hours a day, same amount of food and same type of food, access 24 hours a day. One group could only access their food for 12 hours. The other group could only access their food for 8 hours. The group that it was free running, meaning they could have access to food any time of day, gained weight. Same food, same amount, same nutrients. The group that only had access for 12 hours maintained their weight. The group that had access for only 8 hours lost weight, and they ate the same stuff that every other rodent group ate. So it had to do with the timing of when they ate.
So then that kind of dovetails into this intermittent fasting.
Exactly.
right? So, and I'm always like, I'm always back and forth with it, with all these different like diet hacks, or diet trends and fads, I should call it. So then that would prove that intermittent fasting
Makes sense.
yeah,
It
makes
does.
sense.
It really does make sense in a lot of ways. When you really start to look at the literature on fasting in general, look, we are a society that eats too much.
Yeah,
Period.
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
just portion size alone is ridiculous when you look, especially in the United States. And you go over to Europe, they seem to have a portion size, especially the people where there's more of a Mediterranean kind of feel for the diet. This portion sizes are smaller. You've got much cleaner food, much better food.
Absolutely. Less processed food.
Yeah,
less,
like it's
yeah,
so
of
much
course.
better to eat over there. But when you just look at the diet habits of Americans, we eat too much. There's no question about it. But let's talk about intermittent fasting in particular and how does it affect sleep. So one of the big things that people have to be aware of, and this goes against some conventional wisdom here, is eating in the mornings is probably not the best idea. Okay. Now people are Michael, come on. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You're supposed to eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a prince and dinner like a pauper.
Yeah.
Like, you hear these things all the time,
That's
right?
right.
So here's the deal is if you know your chronotype, that's probably not true. Lions, absolutely breakfast is going to be their most important meal of the day. All right.
So it depends on the chronotype you are, really.
Absolutely, it does. But also, there's a catch where what we know is it's hard to go to bed hungry,
Yes.
right? And so,
And I love to eat. That's like my favorite thing to do at night is eat. That's where I get in trouble all the time.
yes, are
Everybody
you a
does.
night snacker?
I am.
I'm a
Huge.
Oh, I've got something great for you for night snacking. So I'm just started working with this company. It's called Night Food, and they actually have created sleep-friendly snacks, 250 calories or less. They have an ice cream that just came out, which is ridiculous. It's so good. And it's not processed. It's not like a bunch of sugar. Like it's not terrible for you type of thing, but it's actually sleep friendly. That one's about 360 calories for the pint.
Okay, wow. But hold on a second. Then what's in it, number one? Number two, first of all, what's in it then? If it's not sugar, if it's
I'm not saying that there isn't sugar in it. There is some sugar in it, but they use natural sources of sugar. We go through the whole ingredient profile, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know it off the top of my head. But it's definitely something worth checking out. But getting back to intermittent fasting, because I want to finish that thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
For a lot of people, I have them choose to eat in the later part of the day because you can't go to bed hungry. Because when you're thinking about food and you can't stop, and you've got those hunger pains, it's almost impossible to fall asleep. And there's data to show that carbo loading before bed is actually very helpful for sleep. So carbs are not bad. Like I can't stand it when everybody's out there like, oh, carbs are terrible. No, you have to have carbohydrates to live.
Right. And for energy. I mean, the reality is,
Exactly. But you need to be careful about the carbs that you're eating.
Right. Absolutely.
And if you can move your timing around of your meal, like let's say that you're going to intermittent fast and you're only going to eat for 8 hours out of the 24 hours of the day, right? Obviously, you're still doing water, you're still supplementing, you're still making sure you're getting your vitamins, your minerals, all the things that your body needs. Depending upon your chronotype, you may choose those 8 hours very differently.
Right. Absolutely.
This is a great segue into your new book, Intuitive Fasting, because I feel like fasting has become, or intermittent fasting has become a very mainstream fad-like thing to do, right? Like when people they're like, oh, I'm intermittent. And I mean, people are like, oh yeah, I'm doing intermittent fasting, or I'm doing this. And is it, for all, and I know you're gonna yell at me, but I always felt like it was just a way to control your calories, right? Like, if you have a window to eat, then you won't overeat for weight loss. I'm talking. We could talk about the health. I want to talk about the health benefits and all the other stuff. But it became such a fad, right? So what does it mean when you call your book intuitive fasting? Because because intuitive eating is also a fad, isn't it? A little bit. Yeah. I've heard that a lot too.
Yeah, no, I would call them fads, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because everything in healthcare, like I've been a health junkie in my own life personally since I was like a little kid. I was an odd kid that like spent my money like going to the health food store to like buy random things as like a 14-year-old. So it's like since the 80s and 90s for me, which has been part of my life. So you see over the course of the decades that there's a lot of zeitgeists, there's a lot of bubbles that happen. But look, I'm not concerned so much with the bubble. I think it's good because more people are aware of good things and it betters people's lives. It educates people. Hopefully, there's a lot of noise oftentimes with the way that headlines go and confusion goes with Dr. Google. But other than that,
Yes.
I think that education, that's how people are educated sometimes. It's like they're hearing things they've never heard before. But even when fads come and go, if it's solid science and solid clinical application, that's what I get to see on an hourly basis consulting people online.
Yeah.
So fasting's a fad, but doesn't mean it's not legitimate. Humans have been doing it for thousands and thousands of years.
And people have had amazing effects. But, I remember because like you, I'm similar to that point, like where I've always been really obsessed and like curious and fascinated about this. And do you remember not that long, it used to be that you should be eating 5-6 little meals a day to keep your metabolism revving, right? That was one of the things. To eat breakfast first thing, to get your metabolism going. Like all of these, ways of living to be healthy and to be more fit and whatever else have now been kind of like abolished basically. And the new research, and I read this in your book, was that eating two meals a day versus eating 5 meals a day has been way more effective in weight loss and health and all these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a lot of things that we were told growing up, it's not necessarily the truth. But the
Where
truth
did it come from? Where do those things come from then?
Well, look, it's relatively true, but not absolutely true. So that advice example, like 5 to 6 small meals a day, that's relatively true when your body's metabolically inflexible. So if your body is metabolically inflexible, you're in a sugar burning mode and you're living on kindling, which is sugar for fuel, that advice is actually understandable because you're like, yeah, that person needs kindling to get through the day. If you take off that 5th kindling, they're going to be hangry and irritable and bite your head off.
Awful. And I have an example. I mean, I honestly, like when I was reading it, like seriously, I'm like, this is me. Like if I don't eat a meal, I you don't want to be around me. Like I get shaky and mad and angry and it's a nightmare. And so can we talk about this whole metabolic inflexible? Like how does one become this? What is it? Define it for people.
Yeah. And to your point too, I think it's important for me to maybe mention this is that there's quite a difference between chronic caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. There are fasting techniques and fasting mimicking techniques that temporarily lower calories for a time to mimic fasting, but it's not chronically doing it. And refeeding is just as important as the fast or the fasting mimicking protocol. But time restricted feeding, the specific type of subset of intermittent fasting that I'm exploring in intuitive fasting doesn't have anything to do with caloric restriction. You're just planning on specific windows of eating to leverage these amazing health benefits. So that's to be clear on that. But there are some studies that show, and I cite them in the book, that there ended up being a slight caloric deficit sometimes for the deeper time restricted feeding windows. And that does have some benefits to it. It's like caloric deficit. It's not massive reduction, but that certainly is a fringe benefit of fasting. But many studies have been done because we had to know, and as far as the research is concerned, is it because of the calorie deficit? Is it because of the way that people change the foods that they eat, or was it the actual time? So studies have been done to look at the calories. They were controlled for calories. So the same amount of calories, one's eaten all day long and one has a tighter eating window. The tighter eating window, same amount of calories, saw improved benefits. So we know that is a major...
What are the benefits? Tell us the benefits.
Yeah, so I'll give you the short-winded and then the long-winded version. The short-winded is Paracelsus, one of the fathers of modern medicine that I quote in the book. He was known as the father of toxicology, or the Martin Luther of medicine, because he was reforming medicine in the late 1400s, early 1500s in Switzerland. He called fasting the physician within, which I think, to me, everything I'm about to say is summarized with that, like this inner doctor that upregulates and activates and repairs and renews and restores and does all these really cool stuff. So it is upregulating so many cool pathways that we all have. We all are operating to some degree, or we'd be dead. But they're very sluggish because of modernity. They're really sluggish because of this genetic epigenetic mismatch. So fasting, because from an ancestral health perspective, fasting is actually coded in our DNA. So we would have evolved over those thousands and thousands of years to spend times, because of food scarcity, in times of fasting. And then we know on top of that, spiritually and early medicine, Hippocrates, Paracelsus, all used fasting, not because they had randomized controlled trials, but because they saw it improve people's health. And now research is just catching up with antiquity, that we have the mechanisms and we know the benefits of it. But it shifts your body into this metabolic state known as nutritional ketosis, which the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting and fasting all do that. So ketogenic diet in many ways is a fasting mimicking way of eating. And that's why I pair the intuitive fasting protocol with ketotarian, which is what I talked about in my first book, but it's just a deeper dive in this book of how do we mimic fasting and fast to leverage these benefits, because it puts the body into this state of nutritional ketosis, which is known in the research as the fourth macronutrient ketones are. So we have protein, fats, carbs, and ketones. So it's a way to burn fat. So you get the kindling off of the fire for the little bit. That's the sugar for fuel. And you get a log on the fire. It's being fat adapted. And that's more slow burning, more sustainable. You have energy. That's why people have increased energy levels and fat burning. But there's a time and place for clean carb cycling and the kindling on the fire. And we talk about that in the book. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's the best fire, the best light, the best energy is kindling analog. So I don't think you have to pick one or the other and say, well, the sugar is the best or the fat's the best. I think both have their place depending on the person and what their goals are. But it's not just a way to burn fat. Like, I'm so much more excited about, I mean, me back up a little bit. I think the people that are struggling with weight loss resistance, I don't want to delegitimize it. That's exciting for them. But from a functional medicine standpoint, I'm actually more excited about the anti-inflammatory benefits.
Yeah.
It's a way to down-regulate all these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So all these people are going through these chronic inflammatory problems that I mentioned earlier. This is a natural anti-inflammatory you can tap into and upregulate these antioxidant pathways, and also something called autophagy or cellular recycling. It's sort of this accelerated aging pathway, this pro-cellular renewal pathway. It increases mitochondrial biogenesis, actually making new mitochondria, improves BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, encouraging your brain to make new neurons and neuroplasticity. So many cool things. I could speak for hours about it, but it's just allowing your body to do it. It's that physician within that Paracelsus talked about.
Which is amazing. Like, whatever happened, is it like, do you have to be pretty, do you have to know what you're doing or follow a program? Because whatever happened to, remember that whole starvation mode? You don't eat for, if you wait too long to eat, then your body's going to go into starvation mode. It's going to hold on to those calories, and that's how you're going to gain weight. Is that just a myth altogether? Or do you have to be careful or know what you're doing when you're doing fasting?
That's relatively true again, but not absolutely true. If someone's not fat adapted and they're lowering their calories for long periods of time,
right,
that's not a good thing. That's going to put the body in this prolonged state of stress while not even fully, depending on what they're eating, they're not going to even be in ketosis probably. They're going to be, because they're eating like maybe lots of refined sugars and stuff. They're just restricting their calories. So it's kind of this metabolic purgatory in that way, where they're neither in heaven or hell. Mm-hmm. And that's why most dieting fails, is because you get the kindling off the fire. You've never got a log in the fire. And then you just like, this like sucks, and you give up on it. Right. And that could definitely put stress hormones up too high and make it really difficult to lose weight. So there's the yin and the yang. There's the fasting and the feasting. You need both of them. And it's not about like one is better. Like they're both important. And that's going back to that Goldilocks principle that I mentioned earlier. Physiologically, they both are amazing. It's let's leverage the benefits of both without falling prey of the potential pitfalls of doing one too much. So it's just the synergy somewhere in the middle. And that's what I'm exploring in the book.
So it's basically, you have to get your body to be fat adapted, where then you see all the health benefits, right? So
in part. And that's not going to happen overnight. Depending on the health of eating, it's not going to happen overnight. That's why this is a lifestyle change. But yes, that is the goal. The analogy that I use in the book, and you know this because you read it, but for people that haven't, like I call it this proverbial yoga class for your metabolism. Yeah. And you're stretching, contracting your metabolism. Depending on when you're starting out on your journey, like what's your baseline, it's going to take some time. And for some people, they'll get it faster. And how they eat will definitely either speed up or slow down that metabolic flexibility transition, getting that log in the fire. Because if they're eating lots of carbohydrates and junk food, that's, first of all, not, I wouldn't advocate that anyways. I don't recommend fasting your way out of a poor diet. That's like not cool. But at the same time, you can see some health benefits of fasting because you're giving your body a break from all the junk at that point. So it has fringe benefits, but that's not the point of this here. It's actually to really take your health to the next level. And that's that, like you mentioned earlier, like intuitive eating, and you hear that on social media. And that's like big conversation that I have in the book is that, look, there is a certain subset of people that have great health. They feel great. They have no blood sugar problems. And intuitive eating comes naturally to them. And I'm not judging anyone. So if that works for you, great. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the statistics of 50% of the United States has a blood sugar problem, 50 million Americans have an autoimmune condition, millions are struggling with weight loss resistance and hormonal problems. That's that proverbial noise that's going on in the body. And it's going to be hard to discern what's your intuition and what's your hangriness, or what's your intuition or hormone imbalance, or what's your intuition or blood sugar imbalance. So by calming that noise at the beginning, fasting will not be intuitive. So I call the book Intuitive Fasting. It will seem paradoxical at the front end of it, because it is.
Yeah.
You're addicted to the kindling. So you're not going to have fun with fasting. But that's why I'm starting off gently. Like, I'm starting that yoga class. I suck at yoga when I first started, and I still kind of suck at it because I don't do it enough. But if I show up to yoga class, it doesn't mean yoga's not for me. Like, what the heck? I'm not flexible, and I have to gain metabolic flexibility and keep showing up. That's the same thing that's going on with fasting. You have to gain flexibility. On the other end of it, when you have a log in the fire, fasting will be intuitive, because you'll be able to have proper satiety signals. Your blood sugar will be balanced. You'll be able to go longer without eating because you have created this firm foundation for authentic intuitive eating. And that's what metabolic flexibility is.
That's a great analogy, by the way. It's like people with fitness, they want to go from 0 to 60. Like, well, I want to have a 6-pack. Well, you have to at least go to the gym, and you have to have a clean diet. And it takes some time to kind of like get there, but consistency is what it is. If you're saying you get good results with that intermittent fasting, which is the 8-hour window where you're allowed to eat, right?
Yep.
Because that's what it is. That's like the basics, right?
Yep.
Then you can, of course, increase. Why not just stay there? Why are you then taking it to all these other types of factors?
Great idea. And let me just make one other comment. What I would encourage your listeners to do is, if they are doing Weight Watchers and they love it, just throw in some intermittent fasting and see if you get better results. So
yeah, that's a good idea.
You can take fasting and apply it to any diet. So you can be paleo, keto, vegetarian, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig. You can do all that. So at each hour you fast, something different is happening. So 13 to 15 hours, we get growth hormone spikes. And growth hormone will slow the aging process down and will cause your body to start to burn fat. So we also have seen great studies with 13 to 15 hours brings inflammation down. There was a New England Journal of Medicine article that came out where they looked at over 1,500 peer-reviewed journals on intermittent fasting, people doing 13 to 15 hours. And they came out and said all doctors should be using intermittent fasting as their first tool to help chronic disease. So that 13 to 15 hours is crucial for your body just to go into more of a repair mode. But with weight loss, you're now at 13 hours getting growth hormone. And growth hormone stops producing in our body at 30. So this is why it's harder to lose weight as we get older, one of the reasons. So now you're accessing growth hormone. Then at 17 hours, something called autophagy happens. And autophagy is where the cells have this intelligence inside of them. And they basically say, okay, no food's coming. I can see this. So I better look within the cell and clean up what's in the cell and eat the toxins inside, the bacteria that's inside the cell. So the cell literally turns within itself and it starts to detoxify. So a lot of people doing 17-hour fasts, now what they're noticing is, okay, wait, like that skin condition I had, that chronic joint pain I had, like things that symptoms that were piling on top of each other, my body's strangely healing that now. Now, if you go 24 hours, one of the things that happens that we've seen off research is that your intestinal the mucosal lining in your intestinal tract will start to produce stem cells and will repair your whole intestinal tract and make it easier for bacteria to grow that are good. And some of those bacteria actually speed up your metabolism and help you burn fat. So each hour you're getting something more and more. I mean, I can continue on, like, you can even go like 48 hours and your dopamine receptor sites have all been reset. At 72 hours, you get stem cell production. So your whole immune system resets. And if you have any chronic musculoskeletal injuries, those tend to heal. So the longer you go, the more benefit you get.
So this is why I wanted you on the podcast, right? Because a lot of people are doing fasting and talk about fasting, but you have all these groups of people that you put together, and you guys are doing these like 5-day fasts together on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And like, I've been taught my whole life, and this is why it's so difficult for me to wrap my head around it, that like you put your body in starvation mode if you don't constantly feed it, right? Because that's how you rev up your metabolism. You eat breakfast first thing in the morning to get your metabolism going. So this is such a different way of thinking and a totally different thought process that has shown such great results. So what happens to all of that research that talks about putting your body in starvation mode when you don't eat? Like, how do you go 5 days and not eat? Like, even an apple, like, aren't you going to die?
I would love to come and like walk you through that process, because
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like, even the intermittent fasting of just having an 8-hour window to me is so like, it's so difficult to even fathom. And I'm actually going to be trying it starting Monday.
Yep.
Because I'm so tired of everyone telling me that it's so great for me. I have to try it. So I'm going to like bite the bullet.
Yep.
But tell me about this. Like,
so
what happens?
You should definitely try intermittent fasting. That's usually the easiest door in. Actually, what I tell people to do is start with pushing your breakfast back an hour. Just get used to that, and then once you're comfortable there, push it back 2 hours, and just slowly work yourself towards an intermittent fasting state. So we have people, so we have like over 200,000 people that we fast together once a month. We're actually in it right now. We call it Fast Training Week. And the whole goal is
You're fasting right now?
Yeah.
So what day are you in right now?
Yeah, I haven't eaten some of the people are doing 5-day water. I'm just doing 1 meal a day this week. So I'm just eating dinner. So it's 1:00 right now. I haven't eaten anything yet. So, and I feel good.
How long are you doing this 1 meal a day?
This week we're doing it 5 days in a row.
Okay.
But a lot of people do this as their lifestyle. And some people are just doing water fast right now. So they're just in our group. We always give people 2 options, and some people take the option of doing the 5-day water fast. So, but here's what I'll tell you is that there's 2 ways to burn energy. One is from sugar and one is from fat. So you have to train yourself. They call it being metabolically flexible. And when you train yourself in this fasting lifestyle, the fasts get easier and easier. So I would never take somebody like you and just throw you into a 3 or 5 day water. Like you would be, I think you'd be swearing at me. And
swearing would be an understatement. I don't think they'd be able to find you for, find your body. I mean, I get nervous if I can't like eat lunch on time. Never mind, like, not eating for like 5 days. I can't even imagine that,
But so here's to go back to the science again. And then I want to talk about how do you build yourself up to a 5-day water fast. The mitochondria of our cells are a powerhouse of our cell. And they used to think that all disease started in the nucleus. And now they're like, because of cancer, they're like, actually disease starts in the mitochondria. And the mitochondria, your mitochondria are healthy when you can go without food. So when you're hungry all the time and you can't go without food, your mitochondria are not sustainable on their own. They're needing that glucose to function. But once you turn yourself into a fat burner and you're making ketones instead of glucose, those ketones go into the mitochondria, and they start to tell the mitochondria to create more energy. So there's this weird moment where you'll go, oh, I'm hungry, I don't feel good. And if you have a really healthy mitochondrial system, all of a sudden your mitochondria go, okay, we're going to spit out more energy. And you get this insane energy, insane mental clarity. The hunger turns off. Like, it's weird. You have to experience it to know that you were designed for it. But sitting in your shoes, I was in your shoes. I totally get it. Like, I can tell you what I had for breakfast, like almost every day. And I would carry a bag of snacks around with me because I couldn't go without food.
Right.
So you once I trained myself, now I can go without food, no problem.
Right. So it's baby stepping it, basically, like everything else. You got to baby step it. So let's go over this. So intermittent fasting, you say the benefits of intermittent are and then I want to go from step to step, different types. Okay. So the benefits of intermittent are, in a few words or less, are, go ahead, doctor.
You get inflammation comes down.
Inflammation.
Yeah. And the biggest things are inflammation comes down and growth hormone starts to get secreted. And for some people, they may get a little bit of ketones. So.
Okay. And you can eat it in the intermittent fasting. So you're saying if calories don't matter, you can eat whatever the hell you want, basically.
Most people realize when they start fasting, what they eat becomes less important for their weight loss. It's an interesting way to eat your cake and feel great too.
Have your cake and eat it too, right?
Yeah.
So then what's level 2? So level 2 goes from intermittent fasting to what?
So the next level, what we teach is called autophagy fasting. And this is where autophagy fasting has a few more pieces to it. So this is 17 hours without food. And then what we do is we encourage people to break their fast with fat. So they'll have like some nut butter or an avocado or some ghee. And so the reason we have them break their fast with fat is fat stabilizes the blood sugar. And for many people, they can now continue on until dinner. And they don't, it's like a fat snack, and the hunger stops, but the ketones keep going, and you keep staying in a state of autophagy, which is where you're detoxifying. So the cells are detoxifying. The other caveat of autophagy fasting is that you have to keep your protein under 20 grams. And this was based off the science of Walter Longo, who's been studying how our bodies go into the state of autophagy for decades. And if you go over 20 grams of protein, you kick yourself out of autophagy. And all autophagy is detox. Think of it like detox. You're just going into 17 hours, you're going into a deeper level of detox.
And so you break that autophagy, you break the autophagy fasting with a fat, like you said.
Yeah.
And then what's your meal consist of? It can be...
Yeah, so all you have to, if you want to stay in that state of autophagy, you can decide, it could be anything, just keep your protein down under 50 grams, or I'm sorry, under 20 grams.
20.
Yeah.
So does this mean that, are you, with all these fasting, like intermittent fasting or autophagy, let's with those two, because it seems to be the most viable for someone who's just beginning this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Even that doesn't seem viable, but just that, to be honest, but is it then about cycling it, or this is a lifestyle? Like, you don't do this all the time. Like, you do cycle intermittent too. Like, you don't do it. You do 5 days out of 7 days a week, or do you do it every single day?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So this is like what you started to ask this question, and no doubt most people are thinking this, which is, well, doesn't that slow your metabolism down? Because we've been taught like, well, I should eat to speed my metabolism up. So what I find in the fasting world is that a lot of people love the results. They start losing weight. They just feel so amazing that they're like, well, let me do more of it. And they start fasting all the time. And then their metabolism does slow down. So variation is key. To me, intermittent fasting is a lifestyle. You can do that every day. We actually teach what I call a 5-1-1, where 5 days a week you do intermittent fasting. 1 day a week, we encourage people to try to go to 24 hours and only have dinner or have one meal. And then 1 day a week, do whatever you want. Don't fast. So that the 511 seems to be a really good combination. But to your point, you can't keep, if we see this all the time where people, they call them OMAD. They're like the OMAD lovers, which is 1 meal a day. And they come into our group and they're like, I've been doing OMAD for so many years. I've lost, like, the weight loss. Oh my God, the weight loss is like 50, 100 pounds. Like, people are losing massive weight by going to this 1 meal a day idea. And so then what ends up happening is they get stuck because they didn't vary it. So I'm a big fan of variation. Yeah. We're not meant to be an extreme fast all the time.
So you so you can plateau on these diets if you do the same thing, like anything else in life, right?
Any other plateau. Yeah. Any other diet.
But you're saying the first level, which is just basic intermittent fasting, where you have an 8-hour window of eating, you can do that all the time. But anything beyond that, you have to vary it, right?
Agreed. Yep.
Okay. So then so you told us about what do you call it?
Autophagy.
Autophagy fasting. What's the next level after that? And what's the benefits of that one?
So the next level would be 24-hour fast, which actually is becoming my favorite fast. And it's 24 hours. So like, if you eat dinner, you finish putting food in your mouth 7:00 on Monday night, you're not going to eat dinner again until 7:00 on Tuesday. Like, I always tell people, it's not 23 hours, it's not 22 hours, it's 24 hours. So at 24 hours, what happens is that your intestinal stem cells will reboot, but you also get GABA production. So it's funny, as you fast, you get calmer. It's a weird thing. It's like there's like something just calms you, and it's your GABA production. So I find, like, we deal with a lot of people who have like SIBO issues or candida or parasites, or autoimmune conditions that have a gut problem. And so I get them doing 24-hour fasts on at least once a week basis, maybe sometimes twice a week. And there's like a whole nother chemical reaction that happens when you get to that 24-hour mark.
Wow. Okay. And then next after that would be what?
The next level after that is actually for weight loss, the one that actually is magic. Once you've gotten a rhythm with the 24-hour and the intermittent fasting and autophagy, is actually 36-hour fasts. And you know who made this really popular? If you haven't read the book, The Obesity Code, I really recommend you research Jason Fung. In fact, he'd be great to bring on your podcast.
Jason, you and I spoke about him last time. Yeah. I want him to come on the podcast. I know who he is. He's really good.
Yeah. And he's the one that really debunked the calorie in, calorie out for weight loss.
Right.
But he was a nephrologist working with kidney disease from diabetics who just, never got their sugar under control. And so what ended up happening is he discovered, like, why don't we change their lifestyle? And what he found was that if you change their lifestyle, that all the extra insulin that they were looking for, or that was destroying their health, their kidneys, their liver, that if they went into a longer fast, 36, 48 hours, the body would go find that extra insulin and sugar, and it would burn it, and those organs would be like new again. So a lot of diabetics start to do the 36, 48 hours. People who want to lose weight, that's a sweet spot for really going after that stubborn weight that will not come off. So that's where I like the 36-hour fast.
I know, but again, like, my brain goes to, well, yeah, of course, you're not eating for 3 days. Obviously, you're going to lose weight. I mean, isn't that kind of common sense? You're putting 0 calories in your body. So what would happen to me, and this has happened, I'm sure, with a lot of people, is, you're not feeling well, you're sick, you're not eating very much, right? You can go days without eating. But the second you start eating again, you gain all that weight right back. So then you put yourself through all this like hell of not eating and starving, and then you end up gaining all the weight back. Yeah. That's what I would think would happen, right?
Yeah. So I always tell people there's no such thing as a failed fast, that every fast has a healing reaction. But to your point, what will happen is you will lose weight, and then you'll eat food, and some of it will come back on the scale. That's normal, which is why but what's happened in that time period is that you've trained your body to be more of a fat burner. So for a lot of people, as they do this more often, maybe, let's say in that 3 days, they lost 5 pounds, but then they gained 3 back. but they kept 2 off, and it wasn't a failed fast. So their body's learning how to burn fat differently. So now maybe next month, this is why we do them once a month. And maybe next month they decide, okay, I'm just going to do 1 meal a day every day this week. And so they do that. Now they lose 2 more, and they've trained their body even more how to be a fat burner. So it's over time that you're training yourself to your cells to burn energy from fat than to burn it from the glucose you're constantly giving it.
Have you heard of nocebo?
Of course, you think it's going to do harm, and it does.
Right, exactly. Or the opposite, right?
Yeah, placebos, 1/3 of all positive outcomes are placebo.
Right.
Which is not bad. It means the mind has remarkable power to address some of your ailments, which you should treat. If you're hungry on a diet, the hunger lasts 10 minutes. Usually.
It does?
Yes. So initial hunger, I mean, eventually it gets louder and louder. You have to answer. But that first little pang that you feel when you get up in the morning, that's why we're fighting with Mark Wahlberg.
I was going to
all
say that whole fight online with Mark Wahlberg is actually hilarious. I saw how you challenged him to like a push-up competition even, and like a whole thing. First of all, because he's old school. He starts at like 2:00 in the morning.
That's right.
Right. Works out every 2 or 3, eats every 2 or 3 hours. Works out for like 5 hours combined a day. And you're like no breakfast, right? Like do you intermittent fast?
I do. Intermittent fasting, just to explain it to everybody.
Yeah.
And it was the foundation of our System 20 plan this year, which is we have a new plan.
I know.
I
got you.
But so part of it is 20 steps to reduce your chance of illness by 20%, right? And lose pounds. So one of those 20 steps was intermittent fasting, which to me was not really controversial because there's so much data on it. Another big study came out this month, again, reaffirming that intermittent fasting is much healthier for us. In addition, we focus better and we have better resilience and endurance. So
you think that's across the board for everybody?
On average for everybody. Okay. Everyone's different, but on average, that's the truth. Now, here's how it works.
Okay.
If you have dinner at 11 at night and fall asleep, right, you're going to be hungry in the morning because you're going to be withdrawing from the carbs you had for dinner. If you eat dinner at 7 or 8 and you feel a little bit empty when you go to sleep but not hungry, while you're asleep, you'll go through the metabolic switch will flip and you'll enter ketosis. When you wake up in the morning, you're not hungry anymore. So you can go for 2-3 hours.
Right.
But independent of all that, ask yourself, when you first wake up, do you really want food? Or are you only eating because you were told to eat, which is why Mark feels so strong about having breakfast.
It's habitual. Like everything, it's habitual, right?
So have a coffee, dark coffee or dark tea, black tea, and just enjoy your morning. And then 2-3 hours later, when you're hungry, have breakfast.
Right.
I'm not against breakfast food. I actually like breakfast food, but don't have it when you first get up. That will extend the amount of time you're eating. Not eating enough that you'll actually intermittent fasting. And here's the cool thing. If you eat the same number of calories over 8 hours as you would eat over 17 hours, which is the average in America, you'll lose weight.
Even though you're eating the same amount of calories.
Yeah, the body does not metabolize it the same way. It's not anything crazy and wacky. It's just a reality of the metabolism mechanisms of the body.
So you don't believe in calories in, calories out, right? Like a calorie deficit necessarily.
In general, of course I believe in it. Because part of the reason that intermittent fasting leads to weight loss is because you don't eat that much when you're eating.
Because it's a confined period of time.
But in addition to that, there are discounts you get. I'll give you 2 of them. Okay. One is intermittent fasting, because the body does not metabolize the same way over a short period. The second are nuts. You don't metabolize all the nut that you eat. So a nut has 9 calories per gram, like all fats do. But if I eat butter, all that butter gets into my body. I absorb it all those calories get into my blood. Nuts, 20% of nut does not get digested because you didn't chew it all the way. This study was just done this month, proving what we've been suspecting for a long time, which is people who eat nuts don't gain weight because they're getting a 20% discount off all their calories. Well, listen, if you're a 2,000 calorie diet and you get a 20% discount, that means you really were on a 1,600 calorie diet.
That's right.
So without trying, you lose weight. That's why people who are on nut diets lose weight in every trial that I know of. And when you don't eat nuts, it actually leads to weight gain because simple carbohydrates go right to your bloodstream.
The problem with nuts, though, is that for me anyway, maybe I don't think I'm alone, is that you can never just eat the allotted amount. I always have 75 more pounds of nuts than I'm supposed to because they're addictive and so it's like, you know, you're supposed to have how much, like this much almonds, like a handful or like a palm full of almonds.
I don't buy into that. Your brain is not measuring calories, it's measuring nutrients. And so if you give your brain nutrients, it'll stop you eventually. Yes, you're going to eat more than 3 almonds or 6.
Right, 8 or whatever. 9, I think it is.
I think counting nuts is a painful and tragic habit. But then again, you look like a greyhound. So whatever you're doing, do.
Yeah, thank you. But
I think that nuts are something that that your body will tolerate much more than you believe. I don't eat 5 nuts. I don't count them. I fill my whole hand up with them when I eat them. But your brain will tell you pretty quickly that you've had enough nuts because you've got so many nutrients. They're basically plant eggs.
Right.
So stop pushing yourself. You're good to go.
You'll be
Whereas
fine.
if you have a soft drink, in fact, the worst is a diet drink.
Yeah.
Because your brain knows you had something sweet, but it also knows you didn't get any calories. So it says, go back and find what you were trying to eat because you missed.
Right. So that's why they say it's better to have actually a Coke than a Diet Coke. Right?
I mean, I'd have neither.
Or
personally.
neither.
Yeah.
Saying,
I think sparkling water is one of the most overlooked options we have in America.
Yeah, you can add like, you can squeeze a lemon in there or an orange or whatever it is, right?
And for alcohol beverages, I don't know what your favorite is, but things like tequila are wonderful hacks because it's sort of sweet anyway because it comes from agave and it's 66 calories an ounce and you don't need to put a mixer in there, just little lime, ice, and off you go.
And that's why people who are in the fitness world or people who are very conscientious about their calories will always go to a tequila.
Yeah, I've noticed it. Over and over again. And the women in my life, that's what they drink. Plus, you don't get hangovers with tequila.
Right, you don't get a hangover.
Because it's clear alcohol.
Exactly. So then how do people start, because I mean, intermittent fasting, it's been it's one of those trends right now that is obviously not just a trend, but like something that you think obviously works well. How do people get out of that mindset that they need to have breakfast and just try it, right? Because I think, like you said, everything is habitual. So how do you break that habit and to start that new one?
You can't get rid of a bad habit. You have to replace it.
Right. Okay.
So I tell people, get up in the morning, do what they've done in India for thousands of years. A little bit of water with some lemon juice or some citrus fruit in there. Just a juice. You don't want a lot of calories. And just check it out. First of all, if you have to have coffee within an hour or two, you're addicted.
Right. That's me. I have the water, then I also have the coffee.
That's fine. But you just, every once in a while, every week or two, so you just don't go workouts first. Don't have coffee, just to make sure you're not addicted.
Okay.
And then after 2 hours, do what you want. Just start there. Just a 2-hour delay after you wake up until you have your, whatever you're going to do. A lot of people, like my friends in the Today Show, where I do a lot of medical advising.
You're there. You're basically there every single day.
Savannah was kidding me about this, but they're wonderful people. I mean, what great energy on that show. And a couple of them, Carson and Savannah, are intermittent fasting. So they get up at 2:30 in the morning. So I said, drink coffee. It's okay. Have some coffee. Even a little bit of cream, you'll get away with it. It's okay. But after 4 or 5 hours, they get hungry. You don't need to fast that long. From the moment you get up to when you eat, it can even be 2 hours, just a little bit of a nudge. And then on the other side, at night, eat a little bit earlier. Like I don't go out to dinner at 8:30 because I can't finish with friends until 10:30. Well, I'm going to go to bed at 11.
Right.
So there's no way I'm going to be able to have my intestines sleep while I'm sleeping, which means my night is restless.
Right.
And if you really are thoughtful about it, you'll admit that's true for you too. It's almost impossible to sleep on a full stomach.
No, I agree with you.
So just move it up an hour. Have your dinner at 6:30.
I think, but the problem becomes socialization, right? Like, because I'm Jewish, right? So everything I do when I socialize is around food. Like when I'm eating my breakfast, I'm thinking about my lunch. And when I'm eating my lunch, I'm like, I can't wait for dinner. Like I love to eat, and a lot of people do. It's so hard to break that habit, right? Especially when you think it's like, it seems daunting. Like, oh my God, forever I'm going to have to do this. Like there are friends of mine who do intermittent fasting just between Monday and Friday. And it works for them. It's
perfect. You can fast.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing about cultural food, I mean, my wife's family is Italian.
Right, same thing.
I'd never seen this before. They literally go on vacation. They're literally planning the next meal at the meal we're eating.
Come with my family. That's what we do too.
So, all that stated, there's nothing healthier than having a good time with your family around a dinner table. Nothing.
Right.
And I don't want to ever ruin that. Part of the reason I like intermittent fasting, it doesn't take that away.
Right.
So you don't have to have food with breakfast. You can have a little tea or something, but lunch and dinner with everybody is just fine. And you don't have to restrict what you eat. Enjoy it and be the person you want to be. Just shorten the number of hours that you torture your body with food.
Right.
And that doesn't have to be on weekends because I don't think it makes sense when you're trying to be social. Do not do that tonight. I will not be intermittent fasting tonight.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay,
but
I'm glad
for your
to hear it.
Your normal routine should not involve breakfast when you first wake up because you're probably forcing yourself.
Yeah.
Under the belief that it's good for you. And
exactly.
That's where Mark Wahlberg and I disagree. And I'm not alone, and I'm sure he's not alone. But I bet long-term science, the weight of science will land on my side.
Well, the truth of the matter is most people are not Mark Wahlberg, right? Most people don't have that discipline that he does, where they're working out at 3:00 in the morning for 2 hours, then having an entire chicken because he eats an entire chicken,
right.
Then works out again for another couple hours. Like most people can barely even get 30 minutes in, never mind 5 hours, right? So they shouldn't be comparing themselves to that. That's an extreme also.
Well,
right?
for the mere mortals.
Right, for the mere mortals.
And I actually learned intermittent fasting from Hugh Jackman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Hugh would have to gain and lose weight to play Wolverine.
Well, yeah.
His natural playing weight is not what he is in the movie on. So he'd have to gain weight, then lose it again. And he would use intermittent fasting, which he learned from folks out in Hollywood who were bodybuilders, weightlifters, trainers for movie stars, because they needed to get down to very little percentage body fat. So most of us aren't, that's not where we are.
Right.
But it turned out intermittent fasting was the best way to be social and do it always without having a big problem.
Right.
And that's why I started doing it myself. And then I began to realize I sleep much better when I'm intermittent fasting. It had nothing to do with weight loss.
Right. There's
I
other health benefits
sure,
to
many
it.
more. I was more focused. I had more endurance. I could get through the day better.
Right.
And then I began thinking, okay, well, this is actually working pretty well. Let me add an extra hour on each end. It's even better. Now, I don't like going 16 hours without eating. I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
But I can go 13, 14 hours and never even notice that it happened.
Right.
And I think that's where most Americans will settle out. But this is one of those things where it's worth the try.
Right.
You'll be surprised how easy it is.
I think listen, if all these things, all the different diet trends, I find that to be the easiest. Like the ketogenic one, I don't know what you feel about that one exactly. I find that one's very difficult because to be actually in ketosis is very, very difficult.
Well, I become very irritable to be around.
Well, yeah.
And my wife even more so. So I don't like being in a bad mood. And the world turns a little bit gray when I'm ketotic.
Yeah.
So again, I can see why it's really valuable for some people, and it is incredibly impactful if you've got a chronic illness that you want to treat. I just think intermittent fasting gets you there in a much easier way. I like seeing the world in Technicolor.
Yes, no, me too. I agree.